Sarah looked like any other passenger on Flight 847. Nobody knew she was Dragon Lady, the best military air controller alive. When enemy fighters attacked their plane, F-16 pilots begged for help. Only Sarah could coordinate the deadly A-10 attack planes to save 180 innocent lives. Sarah Chen sat in seat 14C on United Flight 847, looking like every other passenger. She wore simple blue jeans, a gray wool sweater, and white sneakers. Her black backpack was tucked under the seat in front of her, and she held a paperback romance novel in her hands. Nothing about her stood out. Nothing made people look twice. The flight attendant, a young woman named Jessica, smiled at her while serving drinks. "Would you like coffee or tea, ma'am?" "Coffee, please, black," Sarah said politely. Jessica poured the coffee and moved on to the next row, having no idea that Sarah Chen was one of the most decorated tactical air controllers in military history. Jessica didn't know that Sarah had coordinated air strikes in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, or that pilots called her Dragon Lady because of her calm voice during the worst combat situations. To Jessica, Sarah was just another middle-aged woman flying from Denver to Seattle on a Tuesday morning. The businessman in 14B was typing loudly on his laptop, sighing and muttering about his delayed connection in Seattle. His name was Robert, and he sold insurance. He had already complained to the flight attendants 3 times about the slow Wi-Fi. Robert glanced at Sarah once and saw a quiet woman reading a book. He had no idea that this woman had saved more lives than any doctor or firefighter, or that she could direct fighter jets and attack planes like a conductor leading an orchestra. To Robert, she was nobody special. The mother in 14A was trying to calm her crying baby. Her name was Maria, and this was her first flight with her 6-month-old son. She looked stressed and tired, and smiled apologetically at Sarah when the baby cried louder. "It's okay," Sarah said gently. "Babies cry on planes. It's normal." Maria had no idea that Sarah had once directed an emergency medical evacuation in combat while under enemy fire, or that she had coordinated rescue helicopters to save wounded soldiers. To Maria, Sarah was just a kind stranger being understanding about her crying baby. This was how Sarah liked it. For 3 years since retiring from the Air Force, she had lived quietly. She bought her own plane tickets, carried her own bags, and waited in line like everyone else. Nobody knew her real identity, nobody asked about her past. She was invisible, and she had earned that invisibility. For 15 years she had been one of the best tactical air controllers in the world. She spoke the language of fighter pilots and understood the capabilities of every aircraft in the Air Force inventory. She could coordinate complex air battles involving dozens of planes, helicopters, and ground forces. But that life was over. Now she lived in a small house in Colorado, grew vegetables in her garden, read books, and took commercial flights to visit her sister in Seattle twice a year. She was just another passenger. The plane was a Boeing 737 built to carry 180 passengers safely from one city to another. Captain Mike Rodriguez had been flying commercial aircraft for 22 years, and he was good at his job. His co-pilot, Lisa Park, was newer but talented, and they had flown together many times before. Neither of them knew that Sarah Chen was on their plane. If they had known, they might have asked her about her experiences. Pilots respected tactical air controllers, but Sarah's military records were classified. Her retirement had been quiet. She had simply disappeared from the military world. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," came the voice over the intercom. "We're cruising at 37,000 feet. Weather ahead looks good. We should arrive in Seattle right on time." Sarah looked out her window at the Rocky Mountains below, their peaks covered with snow even in late spring. She had flown over these same mountains many times in military aircraft, F-16 fighters, A-10 attack planes, transport helicopters, but those flights had been different. Those flights had purposes, missions, objectives. This flight was just transportation. Simple, normal, boring. The plane hit a small pocket of turbulence. Sarah barely noticed, but other passengers gripped their armrests. She had flown through much worse turbulence in military aircraft, where combat flights were never smooth. The flight attendants moved through the cabin collecting empty cups and checking on passengers, smiling at Sarah the same way they smiled at everyone else. Standard service, standard politeness. Sarah went back to reading her book, a simple romance novel about a woman who inherited a bookstore in a small town. Nothing like her real life, nothing like the classified missions she had directed, just a pleasant story to pass the time. But then something changed. The plane shook. Not turbulence this time, something else. Sarah felt it in her bones. Her 15 years of military experience told her immediately that this was not normal aircraft movement. She looked out her window and saw them. Two dark shapes in the distance, moving very fast, with swept wings and long contrails behind them. Fighter jets. F-16 fighting Falcons. Sarah's heart rate increased slightly, but her expression didn't change. She had learned long ago to control her reactions, to never show fear or excitement, to stay calm. F-16s didn't fly escort missions for commercial aircraft unless something was very wrong. They were interceptors, air superiority fighters, and they scrambled when there were threats to national security. The plane shook again, harder this time. Other passengers started looking around nervously. The businessman stopped typing. The mother held her baby closer. People whispered to each other. What was that? Are we okay? Is the plane having problems? Sarah said nothing. She pressed her ear closer to the window, listening. Sometimes military radio frequencies bled through civilian aircraft communications when military aircraft were very close. There it was, faint but clear. Denver Control, this is Viper 1. We have visual contact with the commercial aircraft. There's something else up here. Sarah's blood went cold. Viper 1 was the call sign of an F-16 fighter, and if there was something else in the airspace, it meant trouble. More radio chatter leaked through. Viper 2 to Viper 1, I see it too. Unknown aircraft, military configuration. It's been shadowing the airliner for several minutes. Denver Control, Viper 1, the bogey appears to be armed. Requesting permission to investigate. Sarah closed her eyes and processed what she was hearing. An unknown military aircraft was following their commercial flight, and F-16s had been scrambled to investigate. This was either a training exercise gone wrong or something much more serious. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, sounding different now, worried. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez. We're currently being escorted by military aircraft as a routine safety precaution. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened. But Sarah could hear the tension in his voice. This wasn't routine. Nothing about this was routine. More military radio chatter followed. Denver Control, Viper Flight, the bogey is definitely armed. We can see external weapons pylons. This aircraft is not supposed to be in civilian airspace. Viper 1, maintain visual contact but do not engage without authorization. We're scrambling additional support. What kind of support? A-10 Thunderbolts, close air support package, inbound from Peterson Air Force Base. Sarah's military mind immediately understood the situation. The F-16s were fast interceptors, perfect for identifying threats and engaging enemy fighters in air-to-air combat, but they weren't ideal for dealing with threats near civilian aircraft. One mistake, one missed missile, and 180 innocent people would die. The A-10 Thunderbolts were different. Slower, heavily armored attack aircraft designed for close air support, able to engage threats with precision weapons while minimizing risk to nearby civilians. But A-10s and F-16s operated very differently. Different speeds, different altitudes, different tactics, and coordinating them required specialized knowledge. It required someone who understood both aircraft types and how to make them work together effectively. Someone like Sarah Chen. But Sarah was retired. She was just a passenger. She had promised herself she would stay out of military operations and live a normal life. The plane shook again, more violently this time. Passengers grew scared. Some cried, others prayed. The flight attendants tried to stay calm, but Sarah could see the fear in their eyes. Denver Control, Viper 1, the bogey is maneuvering aggressively. It's trying to force the airliner to change course. Viper Flight, do not let the bogey separate the airliner from your protection. We need those A-10s now. The situation is getting out of hand. Thunderbolt Flight is still 12 minutes out. 12 minutes. Sarah knew that was too long. Whatever was happening would be resolved one way or another in the next few minutes. She looked around the cabin at the frightened passengers, ordinary people, families, business travelers, students. None of them had asked to be part of a military situation. They just wanted to fly safely from Denver to Seattle. Sarah made her decision. She unbuckled her seat belt and stood up. The businessman looked at her strangely. "Ma'am, you should stay seated," he said. "The captain said to keep our seat belts on." Sarah ignored him and walked toward the front of the cabin. Jessica, the flight attendant, saw her coming. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. We're experiencing some technical difficulties. I need to speak with the captain immediately," Sarah said quietly but firmly. "I'm sorry, but that's not possible right now. Please go back to your seat." Sarah stepped closer and spoke in a voice only Jessica could hear. "I'm a retired military tactical air controller. Those fighter jets outside need coordination, or everyone on this plane is going to die. Get me to the cockpit now." Jessica stared at her. This quiet woman in jeans and a sweater had just claimed to be military, but something in her voice, something in her calm confidence, made Jessica believe her. "Wait here," Jessica said. She knocked on the cockpit door and spoke to someone inside. After a moment, the door opened. Captain Rodriguez looked out, his face pale with stress. "Jessica says you're military," he asked. "Retired Air Force Tactical Air Control Specialist. I can hear the radio chatter from the F-16s. They're about to have A-10s join them, but somebody needs to coordinate between the different aircraft types, or this is going to turn into a disaster." Captain Rodriguez had been flying long enough to recognize expertise when he heard it, and right now he needed all the help he could get. "Come in," he said. Sarah entered the small cockpit. Co-pilot Lisa Park looked at her with surprise and hope. Through the windscreen, Sarah could see the F-16s flying in formation with their airliner, and there, barely visible in the clouds, was another aircraft, the Bogey. "What exactly is the situation?" Sarah asked. "Unknown military aircraft has been following us for 15 minutes, Captain Rodriguez said. The F-16s say it's armed and trying to force us to change course. They think it might be planning to shoot us down." Sarah picked up the radio headset and switched to the military tactical frequency, a frequency she hadn't used in 3 years, but she remembered it perfectly. "Viper Flight, this is Dragon Lady, do you copy?" There was a moment of static. Then, "Dragon Lady, holy, is that really you? Watch your language, Viper 1. There are civilians listening. Confirm your identity. This is Major Rick Thompson, Viper 1. Dragon Lady, we thought you retired." Sarah smiled slightly. Rick Thompson. She had worked with him in Afghanistan 2 years ago. He was a good pilot and a professional. "I did retire, Rick, but I'm currently on the civilian aircraft you're escorting. What's your current tactical assessment, Dragon Lady? Thank God you're here. We've got a foreign military aircraft, probably Russian or Chinese, that's been shadowing this airliner since you left Denver. It's definitely armed with air-to-air missiles. We think it's planning to either shoot you down or force you to land somewhere. What's your weapon status? We're both carrying full air-to-air loadouts, but we can't engage while the Bogey stays this close to the civilian aircraft. If we miss, or if he fires back, we could hit the airliner. Status on the A-10 support. Thunderbolt flight is inbound, about 10 minutes out now. But Dragon Lady, we don't have anyone qualified to coordinate fast movers and close air support in this kind of situation. We need someone who understands both mission profiles." Sarah looked out at the F-16s flying alongside them, the pilots' helmeted heads turning as they scanned for the enemy aircraft. These were good pilots, but they were trained for air-to-air combat, not for protecting civilian aircraft while coordinating with close air support. "Rick, what's the Bogey doing right now?" "He's staying in our blind spot, about 2 miles behind the airliner and slightly above. Every time we try to maneuver for a clear shot, he adjusts position to keep the civilian aircraft between us and him. He's using you as a human shield." Sarah closed her eyes and visualized the 3-dimensional battlefield. The commercial airliner flying straight and level at 37,000 feet. The 2 F-16s flying escort positions on either side, fast and deadly but limited by the need to protect civilians. The enemy aircraft hiding behind the airliner, using 180 innocent people as protection, and somewhere behind them, 2 A-10 Thunderbolts flying toward the fight. The A-10s were slower than the F-16s, but built for exactly this kind of situation: heavy armor, precise weapons designed to engage targets while minimizing collateral damage. But coordinating all these different aircraft required someone who understood their individual capabilities and how to use them together effectively. Rick, I need a complete tactical picture. How many bogies are we dealing with? Just one that we can see, but our electronic warfare systems are picking up additional radar signatures. There might be more out there. Sarah's heart sank. Multiple enemy aircraft meant a much more complex situation, and it also meant this wasn't just a random encounter. This was a planned operation. What's the bogey's most likely objective? Unknown. Could be trying to shoot down the airliner as a terrorist attack. Could be trying to force you to land so they can capture someone important on board. Or it could be a test of our response capabilities. Sarah thought about the passenger manifest. 180 ordinary people, business travelers, families, students, nobody famous or politically important that she knew of, unless they were after her. Sarah had worked on classified operations around the world. She knew state secrets. She had coordinated military strikes that had killed important enemy leaders. If a foreign intelligence service had identified her and tracked her to this flight, they might be trying to capture or kill her. But that was a problem for later. Right now, her job was to keep 180 innocent people alive. Thunderbolt Flight, this is Dragon Lady, do you copy? A new voice came over the radio, calm and professional. Dragon Lady, this is Colonel Janet Stevens, Thunderbolt Lead. We're inbound, 8 minutes out. Heard you were running this show. Sarah knew her by reputation, one of the best A-10 pilots in the Air Force. If anyone could handle this situation, it was Janet Stevens. Janet, current situation is one confirmed bogey, possibly more. The bogey is using the civilian aircraft as cover to prevent the F-16s from engaging. I need you to approach from below and behind. Use the terrain to mask your approach. Roger, Dragon Lady. What's the plan once we arrive? Sarah studied the tactical situation. She had F-16s that were fast and deadly but couldn't shoot, A-10s that were slow but heavily armed and precise, a civilian airliner full of innocent people, and at least one enemy aircraft trying to use those innocent people as protection. The solution required perfect timing and coordination. Here's what we're going to do, Sarah said. Viper Flight will execute a diversionary maneuver to draw the bogey's attention. Thunderbolt Flight will use that distraction to position for attack from an unexpected angle. And the airliner will perform evasive maneuvers on my command to clear the engagement zone. Dragon Lady, Captain Rodriguez said nervously, this aircraft isn't designed for combat maneuvers. Captain, a Boeing 737 is more maneuverable than most people think. I've seen airline pilots do amazing things when their passengers' lives depended on it. What kind of maneuvers are we talking about? Nothing extreme, just some turns and altitude changes. Can you handle that? Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. If it keeps my passengers alive, I can handle it. Sarah keyed the radio again. All aircraft, this is Dragon Lady. We execute in 6 minutes, when Thunderbolt Flight arrives on station. Everyone understand their roles. Viper 1, Roger. Viper 2, understood. Thunderbolt Lead, we copy. Thunderbolt 2, ready to execute. Sarah looked at the clock on the cockpit instrument panel. 6 minutes to coordinate one of the most complex aerial operations she had ever attempted. 4 different types of aircraft, multiple objectives, civilian lives at stake, and she was doing it all while sitting in a commercial airliner, still wearing her jeans and sweater. The radio crackled with updates. Viper 1, the bogey is moving. He's repositioning to our 4 o'clock high. Thunderbolt Lead, we're 5 minutes out. We can see the contrails from the engagement area. Denver Control, be advised, we're tracking additional aircraft approaching from the southwest, possibly more bogies. Sarah's blood went cold. More enemy aircraft meant this was definitely a planned operation. Someone had put a lot of effort into setting up this intercept. How many additional aircraft? She asked. At least 2, possibly 3. They're flying low to avoid radar detection. Now Sarah was dealing with potentially 4 or 5 enemy aircraft against 2 F-16s, 2 A-10s, and a civilian airliner full of innocent people. The tactical complexity was enormous, but Sarah had coordinated more complex operations before. In Afghanistan she had once managed an air battle involving 12 different aircraft types while under enemy fire. This was challenging, but it wasn't impossible. Change of plans, she announced. This is now a multi-threat engagement. Viper Flight, you take the primary bogey. Thunderbolt Flight, you handle the additional threats coming from the southwest. I'll coordinate timing to keep everyone clear of each other. Dragon Lady, that's a lot of moving parts, Colonel Stevens said. Janet, you've handled worse. Remember that operation in Syria where we had F-16s, A-10s, helicopters, and drones all in the same airspace? Roger that, but that was over empty desert, not with a civilian airliner full of people. The principle is the same. We just have to be more careful. Sarah turned to Captain Rodriguez. Captain, when I give the word, I need you to put this aircraft into a steep diving turn to the left. Can you do that without stalling? How steep? Steep enough to drop us below the engagement altitude quickly. The fighters will be shooting above us. Captain Rodriguez swallowed hard. Okay, I can do that. Co-pilot Lisa Park was monitoring multiple radio frequencies. Dragon Lady, we're getting word that the additional bogies are definitely hostile. They're armed and approaching fast. Time to intercept, 3 minutes. Thunderbolt Flight, what's your status? 2 minutes out. We can see the additional threats on our radar now. Looks like 3 aircraft, probably Su-27 fighters. Su-27s, Russian-built fighters, fast, deadly, and flown by experienced pilots. This was definitely not a random encounter. Sarah's mind raced through the tactical possibilities. The enemy had planned this operation carefully, with multiple aircraft and coordinated timing. They were either trying to shoot down the airliner or force it to land somewhere. But they had made one mistake. They didn't know that Sarah Chen was on board. All aircraft, this is Dragon Lady. Execute plan in 90 seconds on my command. Viper Flight, you engage the primary bogey when he breaks cover. Thunderbolt Flight, you take the 3 Su-27s coming from the southwest. Captain Rodriguez, be ready for evasive maneuvers. Dragon Lady, Major Thompson said, the primary bogey is moving into attack position. I think he's getting ready to shoot. Hold your position, Viper 1. Let him commit to the attack. Sarah watched the seconds tick by on the cockpit clock. Timing was everything. Too early and the enemy aircraft would escape, too late and the airliner would be shot down. Thunderbolt Flight, the Su-27s are accelerating. They'll be in missile range in 60 seconds. Dragon Lady, we're ready to engage. Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment when months of planning and years of experience came together, when split-second decisions determined who lived and who died. All aircraft, this is Dragon Lady. Execute, execute, execute. Everything happened at once. The primary bogey behind the airliner suddenly accelerated into attack position, finally exposing himself to get a clear shot at the civilian aircraft. But the moment he cleared the airliner's radar shadow, both F-16s locked onto him with their missiles. Viper 1, Fox 3, Major Thompson called, launching his missile. Viper 2, Fox 3, the second F-16 fired. At the same time, Sarah shouted to Captain Rodriguez, dive now. The big Boeing 737 dropped into a steep diving turn that pushed every passenger back into their seats. The aircraft shook and groaned as Rodriguez pushed it to its structural limits, but it responded. The enemy missiles that had been aimed at the airliner streaked through empty air where the plane had been just seconds before. Meanwhile, the 3 Su-27s, approaching from the southwest, ran directly into the 2 A-10 Thunderbolts. Thunderbolt lead, engaging. Thunderbolt 2, I have tone. The A-10s opened fire with their massive 30mm cannons, the sound like thunder even from several miles away. Sarah coordinated the entire battle from the cockpit of the civilian airliner, her calm voice cutting through the chaos of combat. Viper 1, confirm your target is destroyed. Dragon Lady, that's a confirmed kill on the primary bogey. Thunderbolt Flight, status on the Su-27s. 2 confirmed kills, 1 damaged and retreating. The entire engagement lasted less than 4 minutes. When it was over, 4 enemy aircraft had been destroyed or driven off, and the civilian airliner was safe. All aircraft, this is Dragon Lady. Excellent work, everyone. Threat eliminated. The radio crackled with congratulations and relief from pilots who knew they had just participated in something extraordinary. Captain Rodriguez leveled the aircraft and resumed normal flight toward Seattle, his hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Ma'am, he said to Sarah, I don't know what just happened up there, but you saved everyone's lives. Sarah handed him back the radio headset and straightened her sweater. "I just helped with communications." She walked out of the cockpit and returned to her seat in 14C. The passengers looked at her with curiosity. They knew something dramatic had happened, but they didn't know what. To them, she was still just another passenger who had briefly left her seat. Jessica, the flight attendant, approached her. "Ma'am, the captain told me what you did. You're a hero." Sarah shook her head. "I'm retired. I was just helping out." She picked up her romance novel and opened it to the page where she had left off. Around her, passengers slowly returned to their normal activities. The businessman went back to typing on his laptop. The mother fed her baby a bottle. People talked about weather and work and weekend plans. But Major Thompson was right about one thing. Within hours, secure phone calls would come from the Pentagon, from Air Force headquarters, from intelligence agencies that had monitored the engagement. They would want to know how a retired tactical air controller had ended up on that specific flight at that specific time. They would want to know if her presence was a coincidence or if she had been targeted. And they would want her to come back to active duty. Sarah turned the page of her book and looked out the window. The F-16s and A-10s were gone, returned to their bases. The sky was peaceful again. Maybe she would take those calls. Maybe her retirement was over. Maybe her country needed her skills more than she needed her quiet life in Colorado. But for now, she was content to be just another passenger, reading her book and flying to Seattle to visit her sister. The plane landed 20 minutes later. Passengers gathered their belongings and filed out through the gate into the terminal. Sarah waited until everyone else had left, then collected her black backpack and walked off the plane. As she entered the terminal, she saw military personnel in dress uniforms waiting near the gate, probably there to debrief the crew and examine the aircraft, or maybe there to find her. Sarah kept walking. She had a rental car reservation and a hotel room booked downtown. Tomorrow she would fly back to Colorado and resume her quiet retirement. But in her backpack, next to her romance novel and her travel documents, was a secure satellite phone, the kind used by senior military officers and intelligence operatives, the kind that would ring when her country needed her expertise again. And when it rang, Sarah Chen would be ready. Because some people are never really just passengers. They are guardians, waiting for the moment when their hidden skills become the difference between life and death for innocent people. In the terminal, Sarah bought a cup of coffee and found a quiet corner to sit while waiting for her rental car. Around her, travelers hurried past with their normal concerns: flight delays, lost luggage, traffic problems. None of them knew that 2 hours ago, at 37,000 feet, their safety had been protected by a woman whose voice could coordinate fighter jets like a conductor leading a symphony. And none of them would ever know, because Sarah Chen looked like just another middle-aged woman in jeans and a sweater, drinking coffee and reading a paperback book. But the pilots knew. In squadron-ready rooms across the country, the story would be told for years to come. The day that Dragon Lady came out of retirement to save a plane full of civilians, the day that ordinary passengers learned that heroes sometimes hide in plain sight. Sarah finished her coffee and walked to the rental car counter. The clerk was friendly and efficient, processing her paperwork quickly, with no idea that the quiet woman in front of him had just coordinated one of the most complex aerial battles in recent military history. "Will you be visiting Seattle for business or pleasure?" he asked politely. "Just visiting family," Sarah said, which was true. She was going to have dinner with her sister and play with her nieces. Normal family activities, normal civilian life. But as she drove through the Seattle streets toward her hotel, Sarah's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message. She pulled over to read it. "Dragon Lady, outstanding work today. Your country needs you. Call when ready. General Morrison, Air Combat Command." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. General Morrison had been her commanding officer 5 years ago. He knew her capabilities better than anyone. She turned off the phone and put it back in her backpack. Tomorrow she would decide whether to make that call. Tonight, she just wanted to have dinner with her family and pretend to be a normal person. Sarah checked into her hotel and took the elevator to her room on the 15th floor. The room was standard business class: a clean bed, a small desk, a window overlooking the city. She unpacked her few belongings and sat on the bed, looking out at the lights of Seattle. Somewhere out there, People were living their normal lives, working, eating dinner, watching television, none of them knowing how close they had come to a major terrorist attack. Sarah had spent 15 years protecting people who would never know her name or thank her for her service. That was fine with her. She hadn't joined the military for recognition. She had joined to serve her country and protect innocent people. But retirement had been peaceful. 3 years of growing vegetables and reading books and taking quiet flights to visit family, 3 years of being invisible. Now that invisibility was gone, the military knew where she was. Intelligence agencies knew she was still capable of extraordinary things. Foreign enemies knew she was a target worth deploying multiple fighter aircraft to eliminate. Her quiet retirement was over, whether she wanted it to be or not. Sarah ordered room service for dinner and spent the evening reading her romance novel. The story was simple and predictable. Boy meets girl, complications arise, love conquers all. Nothing like the complex realities of military operations and international threats. But sometimes simple stories were exactly what she needed. At 10 o'clock, she turned off the lights and went to sleep. Tomorrow she would visit her sister and try to be a normal aunt to 2 little girls who thought she was just someone who grew vegetables in Colorado. But in her dreams, she was back in the cockpit of that airliner, coordinating fighter jets and saving lives with nothing but her voice and her knowledge of how aircraft work together in 3-dimensional space. Some skills never fade, even in retirement. And some people never stop being guardians, even when they're trying to be just passengers.